This message is brought to you by House on the Rock Fellowship. We're a church that serves and cares for the Miami Valley region in Ohio. Before you continue, make sure to access the notes from our download section of our message page and have your Bible ready. Thank you for being our guest.
This is normally the part where I come up and tell some cute, funny anecdote and some joke to open up my sermon, and that would be really awkward in this moment. But let me see if I can't transition from where we are to where we need to be. So we're thinking about my friend, as maybe you're thinking about yourself. Isn't it easy to get off the path? Isn't that so easy? You have the best of intentions. You have the best of plans to get from A to B, and it's going to be easy, and it's a walk in the park. A couple days ago, we were down south of Cincinnati, and we took the boys to a park to play disc golf. Okay, I don't really play disc golf. My wife has never played disc golf. My boys are good at disc golf. She originally wanted us to go to the most difficult disc golf course in the whole United States. She's like, it'll be fun. I'm like, no, this will be a disaster. This will kill all of us. So let's find an easier one. She found it's a beautiful park. This is going to be a walk in the park. Okay, a walk in the park. Have you guys ever played disc golf before? You got golf in the back of your mind, but it's golf like with Frisbees. Okay? You start out at a tee, just like you're thinking golf, and you throw these fancy little Frisbee disc things, and you try to throw them at a target. And my sons, they whip it, and they whip it, and they whip it, and it goes off where it's supposed to go. And my wife, she's like a Major League Baseball player. She just kind of throws it. And I have every intention of hitting the fairway and having a beautiful walk in the park. I have every intention of doing this, okay? It gives you these numbers on here that tells you how hard you got to throw it and what it'll do and how it'll glide and how it'll, fade this way or that and turn. And my number should say things like poison ivy, briars. That's what happens when I throw this. You whip it right off the path. Every intention of doing well, in the very first throw, it's completely gone. It's completely lost. How many of you know what that's like any given morning? You have every single intention of doing well. And before you know it, the very first breath, the very first step, Satan's got a hold of you. The past has got a hold of you. And it's nothing but briars and poison ivy the whole way. Yeah. How do you get from where you are to where you need to be? How do you bridge that gap? How do you cover that distance? We all start in the same place. We all start at that same mark. We all need to get to that same target. But sure enough, we'll take a million different ways. You'll head off this way, and you'll head off this way, and you'll hit the water hazard, and you're going to hit that pine tree 6 or 7 times and curse your way all the way to Jesus before you move forward. And me, I'm just completely lost. And how do we get from where we are to where we need to be? I think about my friend. How is he going to get from where he is to where he needs to be? In John's gospel, Jesus gives us on-ramps. He gives us directional points, metaphors and images that our frail minds can grab a hold of a little bit. He'll say things like this. He'll say, I'm the door, or I'm the good shepherd. I'm like, I know what a door's like. I've seen a shepherd. I know what a good shepherd's like. He'll say, I'm the vine. Or I'll say this in John chapter 6, verse 51, where we're going to spend our time. It says, I am the bread of life. How many of you know what bread is? You're like, clearly, Paul. How many know what bread is? How many know what good bread is? Like good bread, not Wonder Bread. Like good bread. How many of you bake your own bread? Yeah, right? How many of you bake like sourdough bread? You know, that's been like ancestrally started, has been passed down generation from generation. Like your bread is rooted all the way in Jesus' mother, for crying out loud. It's been passing down the same starter from generation to generation. Angels come to feast on the bread in your house. There's just all bread's not created equal, right? And Jesus comes forth and he says, I am the bread of life. That there's something in where I am to where Jesus needs me to be. That if we could grab a hold of this morning, if my friend could grab a hold of this morning, if those of you who are watching online could grab a hold of this morning, Jesus just might save some souls. And I think that would be pretty awesome, don't you? So if you could find a copy of God's Word, whether it's located in the seats in front of you, or I think Ryan's going to bring one of the verses up that I'd like to talk about. In John chapter 6, verse 51. John chapter 6, verse 51. I'm going to read through it a couple times, and then I'm going to give you some context, okay, so where this verse fits. John chapter 6, verse 51, Jesus is speaking. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever, and the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Let me read it one more time, and then we'll open it up, okay? I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. This isn't just a verse that's floating out there in the stratosphere atmosphere. This verse happens within a context, and that context kind of helps us understand how we should interpret it and read it this morning. One of the things that you need to know as you look at the painting that is this passage is that Jesus teaches this when he's very near the Passover time. Passover, so if you're thinking Passover and the story of Passover, you should start thinking of things like deliverance and salvation, Egypt, slavery, God bringing Israel out of bondage into the promised land through the wilderness. So that story's in the background. Another story that should be in the background as we read Jesus' words is that he just before this did the miracle of feeding 5,000 people with miracle bread. Okay? So right before this, he had a whole hillside of hungry, starving people who had nothing to eat. And Jesus miraculously provides them with food. Everyone was starving. Jesus provides them with bread. One more piece to kind of set this verse in its context is the religious conversation that Jesus is having with some of his critics. Because they say things like this: the wilderness. Jesus feeding 5,000. Yeah, that was a cool miracle, but it's nothing compared to what Jesus can do as living bread. If you think about manna in the wilderness, you're like, hey, that's pretty awesome, you know? You were just kind of on this giant, massive camping trip in the wilderness. We've got nothing to eat, but God miraculously provides us with bread every morning. Jesus is like, that's nothing compared to what I am. I'm the living bread. I'm the true bread. How many of you like to go out to eat? Oh, come on, own it. You guys are lame. You like to go out to eat. How many of you like to go out to eat if you don't have to pay for it? There we are. There's my people. There's my people. Yeah. So you sit there and you look at the menu. You go through the menu, and money's not an option. Whatever you want. And you're looking at the appetizers, and you're looking at the entrees and the salad course and the bread course, and it's just, and maybe there's some pictures, or maybe this is a really fancy restaurant. There's no pictures in the menu. It's just the words, because they're expecting these people to read the menu. But at no point do you think that reading the menu is the same thing as eating the meal, right? I'm reading the menu. It's just going to point me towards the meal. That it's the meal that I really want to get my teeth into, correct? Well, Jesus says, if you think about all those other bread stories and the manna and the feeding of the 5,000, that's just the menu of pointing towards me. I am the main course. I am the living bread. But not just living bread. What does he say? I am the living bread that came down from heaven. This is heavenly bread. Heavenly bread. There's this I am phrase at the beginning of the verse, which is actually really, really important. 7 times in John's gospel, Jesus uses that phrase. I am the bread of life. I am the resurrection. I am the vine. I am the good shepherd. I am the door. And you're like, well, what's the big deal? That's the talking. That's normal talking. But the way that Jesus uses it, Jesus is pointing back to a higher, greater story in Israel's history. When Moses climbed up the mountain and God revealed himself in the burning bush, and God commissions Moses to go back to Egypt to set the people free. And Moses like, hey, time out. They're going to ask me, like, who sent me? And I don't have a name. Who should I say sent me on this rescue mission? And God says, I am. I am that I am. The eternal one. To say I am is to proclaim the name of God. So when he says, I am living bread, I am God who has come down from heaven to earth to save. And the religious nuts go nuts because they know exactly what Jesus is doing. He is positioning salvation outside of themselves. That our deliverance is not some internal peace. Our deliverance is a heaven peace, heaven come to earth peace. And especially during Pride Month, when we posture ourselves as self-saving and self-glorifying and self-nurturing and self-soothing and self-saving, Jesus says, no. What you need comes from heaven, comes down. I am the living bread. It's living bread. It's heavenly bread. It's conditional. I'm the living bread that came down from heaven if anyone eats. If. It's a hard line he draws. At this point, you have a group of people that define their salvation by their ethnicity. We're God's people because we were born Jews. We're Jewish. We're in the club. We're born with heavenly divine bus tickets because of our ancestry. And Jesus is like, no. That's not how this works. He defies their assumptions. The same kind of assumptions that each of us need to wrestle with this morning. Oh, my mom loves Jesus, so I'm okay. Oh, my dad was a deacon, so I'm okay. Oh, my brother serves in a great ministry, so I'll get credit. We listened to Caleb in the car ride over. Surely I'm going to heaven now. There's no assumptions. The message of Jesus is going to speak directly to every single individual person that hears him and hears it today. There's no free rides. There's no assumptions. There's no grandfathering in. If what? If anyone eats. This bread is conditional, it's consumable, meaning you have to internalize it. You have to take it in. It's no different than the Bible that's been by your bedstand, for the longest time. It's a great, great paperweight. It holds the door open. It's a nice little, pretty, it sits right there on your bookend next to your bed. Does that do you any good, just having it next to you? Maybe just osmotically, if I sleep next to the Bible, then it'll just, woo, and I'm good, right? Is that how that works? No. Any more than I could sit you down at the dinner table and I could put an amazing feast that's delicious, and it's got all those micronutrients and macronutrients that everyone's going nuts about right now. And it is everything that your body needs. And it is, unless you take it in and consume it, it won't do anybody any good, will it? No, it's conditional. It's consumable. And this belief language, internalizing language, is hard for many to believe, and it's difficult for many to chew and hard for them to swallow. And a lot of people listening to Jesus' words in this passage get up and leave. Did you know that? When he finishes talking, thousands get up and leave. It's conditional, it's consumable, it's eternal. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. Jesus contrasts what he is with the manna of the wilderness that the ancestors ate on their way from Egypt to the promised land. Because the Jews are like, hey, our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness. And he's like, and they died. And they died. Don't know what you're grabbing a hold of there, Jewish brothers and sisters, but that bread, they still died. But what I'm offering, he says, is eternal. A life eternal. A quality of life. Something that endures, something that doesn't leave you in the wilderness. He's talking about a decision, and the way that it's written, and we can't see it so much in the English, the way that it's written, he's talking about a decision that somebody makes that carries forward into the future. Okay? I always call this my Taco Bell grammar. Okay? Taco Bell, you eat it today and it affects you for a long time. Okay? Okay? The decision to grab a hold of Jesus, who is the living bread, is the decision that you make that carries forward into the future. It's eternal. Multiple ways of talking about the grace and the gifts that we receive from God. Jesus here is talking about a saving grace that moves us from, you think about baptism, from death to life. This is a little different than when we come to the communion table and we talk about sustaining, strengthening grace for the followers of Jesus. Jesus is pointing towards, in this passage, that moment of decision where someone receives eternal life. Living, heavenly, conditional, consumable, eternal. It's sacrificial. The bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. The bread that I will give for. That word for, the way it's used in John's gospel and the way Jesus uses it here, is a sacrificial language. He uses it in the same way when Jesus says, hey, I'm the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Meaning something's coming against the sheep, and the shepherd lays down his life. He will die so that the sheep can live. Or greater love has no one than this, that he lays down his life for his friend. Jesus lays down his life sacrificially. It's a temple image. As you were to go to the temple and you'd see these animals sacrificed for the worshiper, for the one who's bringing it, to restore relationship with the divine, relationship with the Father. Jesus is saying that which I am doing as the living bread is given for the world to restore your relationship. It's sacrificial. He says, I will lay down my life for your life. And finally, it's global in its scope. For the life of the people that got all their crap together, for the people that came from, the right political party, for the people that are, grew up going to Sunday school, for the people that really didn't screw things up. No, it's for who? It's for everybody. It's for anybody. If anybody, he says, eats of this bread, it's for the world. So I was talking about disc golf or golfing in general. You all start from the same tee, the same spot. We all start from the same place when we play, unless you're my wife. She doesn't like starting from there. She doesn't want to start until she gets a whole lot closer to the hole. After all the hardship and the hazards and the difficulties, then Elise says, no, I think I'll play. I'm dead serious. She did this on Friday. Okay, here we are, okay? And we're at this, it's like a par 4 or a par 5. It's like 400 or 500 yards. You can't even see the basket. It's up over some hill and around some dale and behind a bunch of Saracen swordsmen and who knows what other things. You can't even see it. It's just that way, okay? And, Aiden gets up, and it's gone. Jackson gets up, it's gone. Lucas gets up, it's gone. And I get up, and I know, I'm like, whatever. And I get up and pew! It hits a tree and an old lady and bounces around a path, and I go find it, and we're like, Elise, are you ready to throw? No, I don't think I want to throw yet. I'm like, I'll wait till we get closer, then I'll throw. Like, we all start from here. We all start from this spot. This is the spot where we all start from. We all start from the same place, guys. It doesn't matter your history, your lineage, your family, your fallenness, your expression of brokenness, your sexuality, your gender, your political affiliation, your nationality. It doesn't matter what side of the street you live in, what you had for breakfast. He came from the world, for the world, because the world's lost. We are lost. This is the life I give. I give for the world. It's global. It's for you. It's for me. The amazing thing, after saying those things, how he is the living bread, the heavenly bread, the conditional, the consumable, the eternal, the sacrificial, global. People, drove after drove, start to leave. Like, that's too much for us. No, thank you. No, thank you. We don't want any of this. I know I've said this before, like from a preaching perspective, that's a disaster. Okay? To start out with an audience of thousands, and by the time you say amen, you've got 12 in the front row. And it's like your family and your mom. Okay? That's it. Those are the only ones who stuck around. Everyone else left. From a preaching perspective, that's a disaster. Such is the reality of the message and the weight of the truth. One of the few that stayed, Peter, he looks at Peter. And Jesus says, are you going to leave too? Fair question, right? Fair question. Are you going to leave too? And one of the times where Peter really gets it right, man. A lot of the time Peter strikes out. You know that. He just says the dumbest stuff. So thankful for Peter. But Peter stands there and he says, Jesus, where are we going to go? Where else are we going to go? You have the words of life. And we have come to know and believe that you are the Holy One of God. Have you come to that place this morning? Have you made that decision in your life? Can you look back at joy with rejoicing and delight at that gracious moment when you grabbed a hold of that sacrificial gift of him, that you let Jesus, the living bread, nurture your soul? Yeah. Give thanks for that. If not, I'd love to talk to you after church and share with you. He loves you very much. He has much for you. You could use a connection card in your notes. Pastor Paul, will you tell me more about this? I would love to do that. What I would like to do next is I'm going to not take a hard turn, but a little bit of a shift in that when Jesus is talking in John chapter 6, he's talking about a saving grace, a decisive moment and decision that every human being needs to make in their relationship with God. And to not make a decision is making a decision, isn't it? Right? I tell my boys that when they decide to not wash the dishes. Okay, you are deciding to not wash the dishes. You made that decision. By not deciding, you're deciding. And I would pray that everyone would make a decision for Christ. He's talking about a saving grace. But there's another grace that God offers to his followers too. It's a sustaining, strengthening grace. It's the kind of grace in ministry that comes from the Father when Paul is talking to Timothy in one of the last things that the Apostle Paul will write before he's assassinated. He says, be strengthened by the grace of Jesus Christ. That Timothy, what you need to do moving forward is going to call for a divine strengthening. I bring that up because as I've been watching you, my brothers and sisters, for a couple months, I think some of you are tired. I think some of you are oh so weary. And in many cases, it's not because of something bad. It's just because life is hard. And it's exhausting and it's draining. That some of you feel crushed under the weight of life. You're starved and hungry for righteousness and a yearning that is going unsatisfied. You feel like you're drowning in a world of chaos. And the wave after wave after wave just keeps pummeling you. And you need a special kind of grace. Grace of the Father that sustains your soul. I was talking to a friend of mine this last week, and they were sharing one of the situations in their own life, and it wasn't for themselves, but for a loved one. Just a weariness and a heaviness as this loved one is caught in a battle. A battle. And maybe you know that battle in that every time you think you get back up to your feet, something else knocks you back down again. And as soon as you try to get up to your feet, something knocks you back down again. And there's no winning. You get a phone call from your boss and you're trying to get your bearings, and all of a sudden you get a phone call from your doctor. And then you get a phone call from your son. And he doesn't want to talk to you ever again. Because Satan doesn't play fair. He's sneaky. And if he can get a sheep isolated and alone and wearied and away from the good shepherd, that's easy pickings. That's CeCe Pickens. My eldest son is down in Kentucky right now. He's competing in what they call keeper wars. The life of a goalkeeper on a soccer field is a unique thing. It's not a lot of glory and a lot of guts. And so keeper wars is they take the two goals of a soccer field and they move them really close together. Okay, real close together, about 25 yards apart. And the two goalies just go at it. They kick at each other, and they try to score on each other, and who can score the most points in 6 minutes. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. And that's Lucas is doing this last weekend. And so he and I were talking about their strategy. What's your strategy, Lucas? How are you going to go about doing this? How are you going to win? And what we had talked about was the fact that Lucas, you have to get them exhausted. You have to make them fight for every ball. You have to make them jump and dive. You need to make them hit the ground and hit the ground hard. And as soon as they get back up on their feet, you have to let it rip again. You need to weary them out so they will have quit long before the game is over. And Lucas did it. And those of us who were there watched many a goalkeeper lose their mind and their religion and their Jesus. Okay, as Lucas just barreled on them and barreled and made them jump and made them fall and made them hurt and then turned around and did it again. Now, by no means am I equating Lucas with Satan. But Satan will hit you, and then he will hit you again. And then before you get up, he will hit you again, and he will hit you again. And so you read verses in the Bible like this. Carry one another's burdens, and in this you fulfill the law of Christ. That when one of us suffers, we all suffer together with it. That it was never Jesus' intention that anyone carries their cross alone. So with that in mind, I'm calling the House on the Rock family to a day of fasting and prayer on Wednesday. My Titus 10 guys, could some of you come up and help hand something out for me, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. Please, yep. 6, yep. Just start where you're at and start handing out. I need everyone to get one of these sheets, guys. Thank you. Yep, just find someone who doesn't have one and give it to them. Find someone who doesn't have one and give it to them. Yep. Yep. Make sure everyone has one. Everyone. Make sure everyone gets one. Who still needs one? Thank you, guys. Thank you. What's important is that in this moment, you might not be the person who needs to receive the grace of fasting and prayer. Maybe you're in a position of strength to offer it for somebody else. But we're going to invite those in our church family, and far more than I had realized in the first service, there's lots of needs for themselves and for loved ones. But if you find yourself and you feel that, yes, Paul, I feel like I'm drowning. Yes, Paul, I feel exhausted. Yes, Paul, I feel crushed. And it's been going on for weeks and months. It's a spiritual thing, a stronghold from my past. It's a physical thing, and the doctors have no answers. It's a relational thing. I'm pretty sure that this week the marriage is going to end. Those types of things. Forgive me. This isn't necessarily about Aunt Debbie's toenail, okay? Okay? But who am I to say what is and what isn't? You say, yeah, Paul, I need prayer. I want you to write your name down, okay? Or maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's for a loved one in your family. They're going through something. And we would cherish the privilege of praying for them. Then just write down their first name. Write down their first name. Whether or not you want to include the details is entirely up to you. You don't have to do that. We don't need that. Maybe you say, please, would you pray for this? We want you to pray for this. We're asking for fasting and prayer for this. Then write it out. You don't have to. Well, do I have to put my name? Yes. Yes, you do. That is your investment of faith in the strength and the grace that comes from your church family. Well, I have an unspoken prayer. No. Let us carry your cross with you and be humbled by the ministry and grace that the church wants to offer you. And then during the next song, you fold that and you bring it up here and you put it down. You put it down here for someone else. And then what we're going to do is on Wednesday, we're going to give that day to fasting. What is fasting? Fasting is when you don't eat food. Okay? Well, what if I just don't go on social media? Well, that's a great idea, but that's not fasting. Fasting is when you don't eat food. Okay? Let me illustrate it this way. How many of you have ever experienced so much grief and pain in your life that you didn't eat? You were led to such a place of grief that friends came up to you and says, hey, have you eaten today? No. And you didn't even realize that you hadn't eaten. Okay? What had happened in that moment? Because we are holistic beings, okay? We're spiritual and we're mental and we're emotional and we're physical. Because our spirit is grieving so much, the body aligns itself with that grief so that we can suffer completely and wholly. There are brothers and sisters in our church family that are grieving. And so we, the body of Christ, are going to align ourselves with that and fast with them and grieve with them. And so in the place of eating breakfast, you're going to receive this prayer list. And there's a place on the bottom, maybe you don't have a request, but you want to make sure that you get this list, to update your email or to update a phone number, because Vanessa and I are going to go through, we're going to compile that list of names with whatever specifics people provide us with. We will email that out, we'll text that out to the church family, either tomorrow or Tuesday, so that Wednesday morning you can receive those requests, okay? And then at breakfast, instead of eating breakfast, you pray through those names. I don't know how to do that. What if I don't know these people? You don't need to know. Lord's Prayer is awesome. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done in Pastor Paul's life. Be his daily bread. Forgive him his debts. Guide him through his trials. Deliver him from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. You pray through that list of names instead of eating breakfast. You get to lunchtime, you're going to do the exact same thing, okay? Instead of eating lunch, you're going to pray through that list. And then we're inviting you, join us at 6 o'clock that evening, and we'll come together as a church family, and we'll pray over those together. We'll pray over those together. If people want to have hands laid on them, we'll surround them, okay? We're all going to grab onto that anchor rope as the storm blows, for we have this hope as an anchor for the soul. Okay. Artists, would you come up, please? We're going to sing together. I'm inviting you, as we sing, if you have a prayer request that we could partner with in fasting and prayer, or it's on behalf of someone else, that during the song you just come up and you place it in that bowl. You place it in that bowl. Well, I don't want people to know that my life is a wreck. We know, because this is a hospital and we're all very sick and we need all the grace and ministry that we can get. Maybe find someone to walk up with you, but this is your demonstration of faith and the graciousness of God. We're going to collect those, we'll send them out to the church family, and then Wednesday we'll set aside that day for fasting and prayer. And the strength of God and the peace of God will sustain us. And who knows what he might do. Let's stand. And I'm going to pray, and then we're going to go to song. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And we'd love for the journey to continue.
If you're a guest, would you consider reaching out to us? We would love to come alongside and encourage you in any way that we can. If you're someone who's joined us today and you are desperately reaching to find hope wherever you can, again, Jesus came that we would find hope. You can find hope today. If you want to send us a short note, a member of our Hope team would reach out quickly, promptly, to come alongside and see what we can do to encourage you in whatever storm you might find yourself in. That's why Jesus came, and that's why we're here. Jesus said there's two ways to live your life, and a wise man, a wise woman, builds their life on Jesus' instructions. God bless.